Introduction. Many men pride themselves on being intelligent, disciplined, and logical, yet when it comes to relationships with women, even the smartest men often fall into subtle but costly mistakes. These errors aren't about lack of knowledge, but about misunderstanding female psychology, emotional dynamics, and the balance between strength and sensitivity. In the pursuit of connection, men sometimes overthink, overgive, or overanalyze, forgetting that attraction is often built on presence, confidence, and emotional awareness rather than constant effort. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes invaluable. Stoicism teaches men to master their emotions, maintain self-respect, and approach relationships with clarity rather than desperation. By applying Stoic principles, men can avoid common pitfalls that weaken their presence and instead build stronger, more authentic connections. In this lesson, we'll uncover the 9 mistakes smart men frequently make with women and how Stoic philosophy offers practical solutions to correct them. 1. Overthinking. Every interaction is one of the most subtle yet destructive habits a person can fall into, because it slowly erodes confidence, peace of mind, and the ability to connect authentically with others. When you replay conversations in your head, analyzing every word, tone, or facial expression, you begin to create stories that often have little to do with reality. You might think, did I say something wrong? Or maybe they secretly dislike me, when in truth, the other person probably moved on without a second thought. This mental loop doesn't just drain your energy, it also makes you hesitant in the moment. Because instead of speaking freely, you second-guess your words and gestures as you're making them. Over time, this habit fosters insecurity and self-doubt, because you begin to believe your worth is tied to the imagined judgments of others. From a Stoic perspective, this is a classic trap of placing too much value on what is outside your control, the thoughts, opinions, and interpretations of other people. The only thing within your control is your intention, that you speak with honesty, respect, and sincerity. If yes, then the outcome no longer belongs to you. By recognizing this, you begin to free yourself from the endless cycle of mental replay and self-criticism. Another danger of overthinking is that it makes relationships feel heavy, as though every conversation is a test you could fail. People are drawn to ease, warmth, and presence, but overthinking robs you of those qualities because your attention is trapped in your own head, rather than on the moment unfolding before you. The key lesson here is to practice detachment. Let go of the need to control how others perceive you and focus instead on living in alignment with your values. If you spoke kindly, listened sincerely, and acted with integrity, then you have done your part, and nothing more is required. Every time you catch yourself replaying an interaction, remind yourself, it is done, I cannot relive it, and I cannot control how they interpret it. Over time, this mindset builds a calm inner strength that not only reduces anxiety but also makes you more magnetic to others, because you radiate trust in yourself. People respect those who do not chase validation or obsess over impressions. They respect those who are steady, grounded, and unshaken by minor social uncertainties. The truth is, most people are far too preoccupied with their own worries to analyze your every word, so the judgment you fear is often an illusion. By breaking free from overthinking, you reclaim mental clarity, emotional stability, and the freedom to simply be yourself. This is not just a tool for social confidence, it is a path toward living with greater peace and authenticity, where your worth is no longer tied to the fleeting perceptions of others but anchored firmly in your own character. Putting her on a pedestal. One of the most common mistakes men make in relationships, especially in the early stages of attraction, is putting a woman on a pedestal. On the surface, it may look like admiration, respect, or deep affection, but in reality, it often reflects insecurity and a lack of self-worth. When a man places a woman above himself, treating her as flawless, untouchable, or the sole source of his happiness, he creates an unhealthy dynamic that damages both his own confidence and the relationship itself. A pedestal turns her into an idol, not a human being. It magnifies her qualities while minimizing his own, making the connection imbalanced. Instead of being two equals coming together to share mutual respect and love, the relationship becomes lopsided, where one person is elevated while the other is diminished. This is not only unattractive, but it also builds silent resentment over time. Because no one wants to be worshipped, they want to be valued as a real, imperfect person. From a psychological standpoint, women can sense when a man is overly attached to their validation, and this dependency kills attraction. True confidence is about knowing your worth and standing side by side with her, not beneath her. Stoic wisdom reminds us to treat others with fairness and dignity, but never to lose our own self-respect in the process. By grounding yourself in self-mastery and self-respect, you create balance. You can appreciate her beauty, her strengths, and her presence without losing your own identity. A strong man doesn't need to overgive, overpraise, or sacrifice his values to keep her interested. Instead, he leads with character, principles, and a calm sense of inner worth. Putting her on a pedestal also sets unrealistic expectations. For her expectations she will eventually fail to meet, because no one can live up to being perfect. When reality catches up, disappointment sets in, and the illusion shatters. The lesson is clear. Admiration is healthy, worship is not. The right woman doesn't want you to bend your world around her. She wants you to stand tall in your own. Relationships thrive when both people respect themselves and each other equally. To avoid the pedestal trap, practice gratitude for her qualities without demeaning your own. Set boundaries that reflect self-respect and cultivate purpose in your life beyond her. Remember, you are not lucky that she chose you. You are both fortunate to have found one another. Confidence, balance, and equality form the foundation of a lasting connection. The moment you stop chasing validation and start standing firm in who you are, you become more attractive, more respected, and more capable of building real intimacy. A pedestal may seem like love, but true love requires two equals walking together, not one kneeling before the other. 3. Overinvesting too soon. One of the most common mistakes people make in relationships, whether romantic, social, or professional, is overinvesting too soon. Overinvestment happens when someone gives too much of their time, energy, emotions, or resources early on, before the other person has demonstrated equal interest, commitment, or reliability. This behavior often stems from eagerness, insecurity, or the desire to secure a connection quickly, but it can backfire in ways that damage both self-respect and the relationship itself. When you give too much too soon, you create an imbalance where one person is doing the chasing and the other is doing the receiving, which can unconsciously lower your perceived value. In human psychology, we tend to value what requires effort and patience. When something or someone is handed to us without resistance, we may appreciate it less or even take it for granted. For example, texting constantly, rearranging your schedule, spending excessive money, or expressing deep emotions before genuine trust and consistency have been established can overwhelm the other person and make you appear needy. Stoic wisdom teaches that virtue lies in moderation and self-control, meaning you should align your actions with reason rather than impulse. Overinvesting too soon is usually a sign of seeking validation from outside rather than anchoring your worth internally. The healthier approach is to pace yourself, give gradually, and allow reciprocity to unfold naturally. By doing so, you protect your energy, test the other person's intentions, and let the relationship develop organically instead of forcing it. It also shows that you respect yourself enough to set boundaries and not gamble your emotional stability on someone who has not yet earned that level of access. Think of it like watering a plant. Too much water at once drowns it, but steady, measured care allows it to grow strong. By resisting the urge to overinvest, you not only preserve your dignity but also give the other person space to reveal their true character and commitment. Ultimately, patience and balance are what lead to strong, lasting bonds, while overinvesting too soon often leaves you drained, disappointed, and wondering why your generosity was not appreciated for. Ignoring boundaries is one of the most damaging behaviors in relationships, friendships, and even professional environments, because it undermines trust, respect, and personal dignity. Boundaries are essentially the invisible lines that define what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior between people, and they serve as safeguards for emotional, physical, and psychological well-being. When someone ignores boundaries, whether by constantly interrupting, overstepping into private matters, disregarding personal space, or refusing to accept a no, they are sending a message that the other person's needs, values, and feelings are not important. This behavior creates an imbalance of power where one person takes while the other is forced into a position of defense, often leading to resentment, stress, or withdrawal. In the long term, ignoring boundaries can erode the very foundation of a relationship, because respect and trust cannot thrive in a space where limits are constantly crossed. For example, a friend who repeatedly pressures you to share secrets you are uncomfortable with, or a partner who dismisses your need for alone time, is showing disregard for your autonomy. The result is often emotional burnout, where the person whose boundaries are being ignored feels invisible, unheard, or manipulated. On the other hand, people who constantly ignore others' boundaries also harm themselves, because they may never learn to form healthy, respectful connections, and their relationships may collapse due to their inability to honor limits. From a Stoic perspective, respecting boundaries is a form of wisdom and self-discipline, because it means recognizing what is within your control, your own actions, words, and responses, while understanding that others have the right to govern their own lives. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out, but guides that allow relationships to function with clarity and mutual respect. To ignore them is to live with arrogance and entitlement, while to respect them is to live with humility and wisdom. Thus, the lesson in ignoring boundaries is clear. It is not just a sign of disrespect to others, but also a failure of character. Because true strength lies not in controlling others but in mastering oneself and creating space where both people can thrive. A person who refuses to acknowledge limits reveals insecurity and a lack of emotional intelligence, while a person who honors them demonstrates maturity, patience, and genuine care. If you want to build lasting and meaningful connections, you must learn to recognize and respect the boundaries of others, just as you must firmly protect your own. Without this balance, relationships will always tilt toward exploitation, misunderstanding, and eventual collapse. Respecting boundaries, therefore, is not optional. It is the foundation of dignity, freedom, and harmony in all human interactions. 5. Seeking. Constant validation. Seeking constant validation is one of the most subtle but destructive habits a person can fall into, because at its core it reflects an unavoidable belief that self-worth must be confirmed by others before it feels real. When someone continuously looks for approval, praise, or reassurance, they are essentially handing over the keys of their happiness and confidence to people who may or may not care about their well-being. This habit is often born from childhood experiences where love and attention were conditional, or from a society that constantly measures worth through likes, comments, and external recognition. The danger of seeking validation is that it creates a never-ending cycle. The moment one receives praise, it only brings temporary relief, and soon after, the craving returns, demanding another fix. Over time, this can lead to anxiety, insecurity, and emotional dependence, making it impossible to feel grounded in one's own identity. A Stoic perspective teaches us that true strength comes not from the approval of others but from living in alignment with reason, virtue, and inner integrity. When we base our sense of self on what others think, we lose our freedom, because people's opinions are fleeting and inconsistent. One day, they may admire you, and the next, they may criticize you. If your self-worth rides that wave, you will always be restless. The healthier alternative is to cultivate self-validation, learning to recognize your own progress, to celebrate your quiet victories, and to live by principles that matter to you, not the crowd. This does not mean shutting out feedback or ignoring constructive criticism. It means understanding that validation is useful as information but not necessary for inner peace. In relationships, constant validation seeking can become draining, as it shifts the dynamic from partnership to reassurance duty, leaving others feeling burdened and you feeling perpetually unsatisfied. Freedom arises when you no longer need to prove yourself every moment, when you can act confidently knowing that your worth is not up for debate. Practical ways to break this cycle include practicing solitude, journaling about your achievements instead of waiting for recognition, and setting boundaries with yourself when you notice the urge to chase approval. Over time, as you reinforce the belief that you are already enough, the hunger for validation weakens and transforms into a calm self-assurance. The paradox is that when you stop chasing validation, others tend to respect you more, because confidence grounded in inner stability is magnetic. Seeking constant validation is a prison of the mind, but self-acceptance is the key that opens the door. The lesson is clear: approval will always fade, but the character you build within yourself endures, and it is this inner foundation that gives you lasting peace, strength, and freedom. 6. Confusing kindness with attraction. One of the most common mistakes people make in relationships, especially in the early stages of interaction, is confusing kindness with attraction. When someone smiles at us, listens attentively, or shows small gestures of care, our minds are quick to interpret these signals as romantic interest, when in reality, they may simply be signs of politeness, empathy, or basic human decency. This confusion often arises because kindness feels good. It makes us feel seen, valued, and important, and when we are craving connection, our emotions can exaggerate these feelings into something they are not. Stoic wisdom reminds us that emotions, while natural, can be deceptive if we do not test them against reason. Just because someone compliments you, offers help, or spends time with you does not necessarily mean they are attracted to you. They may simply be acting according to their values, personality, or social habits. This misunderstanding can lead to unnecessary heartbreak, misplaced expectations, and awkward confrontations, as one person begins to build romantic hopes while the other remains unaware of these assumptions. The key is to approach interactions with clarity and self-awareness instead of immediately assuming attraction. Observe patterns over time, look for consistency in behavior, and most importantly, seek direct communication rather than relying solely on interpretation. Real attraction involves more than kindness. It includes intentional effort, emotional investment, and a desire for exclusivity that goes beyond casual friendliness. By practicing self-control, we avoid projecting our desires onto others and prevent ourselves from creating illusions that lead to disappointment. When we learn to separate kindness from attraction, we not only save ourselves from misreading signals, but also preserve healthier relationships based on respect rather than assumption. This mindset protects us from the emotional rollercoaster of false hopes and allows us to stay grounded in reality. The Stoics taught that we must learn to govern our judgments and not be carried away by appearances, and this lesson applies directly to modern relationships. Not every smile is a confession of love, and not every act of generosity is a sign of hidden passion. By disciplining our perception, we can appreciate kindness for what it is without demanding it to be something more. This clarity gives us peace of mind, strengthens our confidence, and allows us to recognize genuine attraction when it is truly present. In the end, wisdom lies in resisting the temptation to assume and instead practicing patience, observation, and honest communication, which are the cornerstones of meaningful human connection. 7. Failing to control emotions. Failing to control emotions is one of the greatest weaknesses a person can display, because it shows that they are enslaved by impulses rather than guided by reason. Emotions in themselves are not bad, They are natural signals of how the mind and body are reacting to life. However, when a person allows anger, jealousy, fear, or despair to dictate their words and actions, they lose clarity and often damage themselves as well as others. An uncontrolled outburst can break trust, destroy relationships, and create consequences that cannot be undone. For example, a moment of rage can end a friendship or even lead to violence, while unchecked envy can poison the heart and make one blind to gratitude. In Stoic philosophy, the wise person understands that while external events cannot be fully controlled, internal responses can be mastered with discipline. When we fail to control our emotions, we essentially hand over our freedom to circumstances and to other people, letting them dictate how we feel and act. This makes us reactive rather than proactive, victims rather than masters of our lives. Emotional instability also. 8. Talking instead of listening. One of the most common yet overlooked mistakes in human interaction is the tendency to talk instead of listen. While speaking allows us to express our ideas, listening is what builds understanding, trust, and true connection. Many people fall into the trap of believing that talking more makes them appear intelligent, confident, or persuasive, when in reality it often has the opposite effect. When someone dominates a conversation, it signals a lack of interest in others, and people quickly sense that they are not truly being heard. Stoic wisdom reminds us that nature gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth for a reason: to listen twice as much as we speak. Listening is not a passive act. It is an active discipline that requires humility, patience, and attention. By choosing to listen first, we not only honor the other person's voice but also put ourselves in a stronger position to respond wisely. When you listen, you learn about people's emotions, motives, and perspectives. But when you talk too much, you limit yourself to only what you already know. True growth happens in silence, in the ability to receive knowledge rather than constantly display it. In relationships, talking instead of listening can create distance, as the other person feels undervalued or dismissed. In leadership, it can cause poor decisions because crucial feedback is ignored. And in personal development, it blocks the wisdom that comes from observing life and understanding others. The art of listening is also deeply connected to self-control. It means resisting the ego's urge to dominate and instead allowing space for others to contribute. Great communicators, negotiators, and leaders are remembered not because they spoke the most, but because they listened the most and then spoke with precision. To correct the habit of talking too much, practice intentional pauses, ask questions, and focus on truly hearing before forming your response. Train yourself to listen without planning what you'll say next, because doing so ensures you are actually present in the conversation. Silence does not make you weaker, it makes you wiser. The one who listens learns the hidden truths beneath words, while the one who only talks learns nothing new. Remember, people are far more likely to respect and trust someone who makes them feel heard than someone who constantly fills the air with noise. Therefore, speaking less and listening more is not just polite, it is powerful. The paradox is that when you master listening, your words carry more weight, because they are rooted in understanding rather than impulse. In the end, talking instead of listening is a subtle form of arrogance, but listening is an act of wisdom. When you choose to listen, you open the door to deeper connections, richer knowledge, and a calm